Hello and welcome to Lesson 8, Forensic Psychology, Psychodynamic Explanations of Offending Behaviour. If you want a quick recap on psychodynamic explanations, generally, theory, there is a link here which you can go to for a short video. Otherwise, check your guide notes, have a quick read of these guide notes, and then get stuck in. So, this is our final psychological explanation of offending behaviour and our final explanation of offending behaviour at all. So, it should be a good one. One of the first things you should consider being able to do at this stage is to outline the main assumptions of the psychodynamic approach. Pause it, go away, do this. I'll wait. Cool, welcome back. So, you should have got things like conscious, pre-conscious and unconscious. Remember our iceberg, the bulk of it is underwater. We have that just beneath the surface, the pre-conscious where stuff can emerge into the consciousness, and the relatively smaller consciousness. Biological drives and instincts, so we have these biological needs and urges which drive our behaviour. Personality is made up of three elements, the id, the ego and the superego. We have things like parapraxes, these Freudian slips where our deepest, well not our deepest, our pre-conscious thoughts pop into our conscious behaviour. Fixation, we have the stages of psychosexual development. We have the Oedipus stage, we have the sort of anal and the oral stages. We have the Oedipus complex, which is resolved during these stages. We can become fixated at any particular stage, and this can have consequences later on in life. We have the defense mechanisms of repression, denial and displacement. And we have methods of investigating it, such as dream analysis, hypnosis and free association. So that's a quick recap of psychodynamic approach. How might I explain crime? Well, the Freudian explanation of crime, we can focus on the personality, and we can talk about a single feature, the superego. Now, according to Freud, a superego is our moral center, and it really balances out the desires of the id, which tend to be instant gratification. And if the id had its wicked way, we'd be doing all sorts of inappropriate, immoral and criminal acts. So there are three possible contenders of how the superego may have developed to allow essentially the id, either too much or too little, influence. A weak or underdeveloped superego would essentially allow the id to be unrestrained. This would lead us to an increase in impulsive behaviour. It would mean we're unable to delay gratification, and that's things like thievery. You see something, you want it, you take it. Murder, someone has made you angry, so you lash out. This is because you've got no superego reining you in, saying this is what you should be doing. This is, there's no feelings of guilt or remorse. Harsh or overdeveloped ego has also been associated with criminal behaviour, according to the psychodynamic approach. And this is an example of people who feel extreme guilt constantly, and they feel like they should be punished. An example might be, I've put Winona Ryder here because she's incredibly rich. She's attractive, she's a good actress, she's got everything going for her. So why was she shoplifting? Freud might argue because she feels guilty, she has an overdeveloped superego, and she desires to be punished. And therefore, she commits these petty crimes, which she's obviously going to get caught for. She's Winona Ryder. It's not like they're not going to recognise her. The third type is a deviant superego. So like father, like son. Your superego develops normally, but based on the identification of a deviant parent. So it develops deviant principles, but essentially develops normally, just in a dysfunctional environment. So those are the three possibilities. We could also talk about Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis. So this is where we develop this internal working model, theories or concepts about others, beliefs about ourselves, how lovable we are, trustworthiness of others, about the world generally. Criminals, often find it difficult to trust others. They believe everyone's out to get them, and therefore, it's eat or be eaten. Continuity hypothesis. Dysfunction at this young age can lead to problems later on in life, and affectionless psychopathy, which brings us to Bowlby's 44 thieves. Remember, 44 thieves were compared to 44 non-thieves from a delinquency centre. Bowlby collected data via interviews, found that 17 out of the 44 juveniles, thieves, had experienced early prolonged separation, compared to very few of the controls. Out of the thieves, 15 were classed as affectionless psychopaths, as in they had no guilt or remorse for their actions, while only 2 of the 44 non-thieves made that same classification and had experienced separation. Therefore, these findings support the idea that criminal behaviour may stem from early childhood separation from the mother, and actually making a link to Harlow and his monkeys. Remember the antisocial behaviour that the separated monkeys engaged in, especially when they become parents, became abusive, they killed some of their offspring. They were incredibly violent as well. The males didn't know how to reproduce and mount the females, so they would viciously attack them. There's strong evidence that separation from parents at an early age and suffering privation and deprivation can lead to criminal behaviour later on in life. Explosive criminals. Magaji reports an example, a different type of criminal. These calm, kind, normal types of people who just snap. From her point of view, she talks about an 11-year-old boy with no history of aggressive behaviour who stabs his older brother 34 times out of nowhere. Not mentally ill, no brain damage that we know of or anything like that to account for it. Instead, she argues an example of extreme inhibition of and no healthy channels of expressing aggression, and therefore it just sort of explodes out. So it's almost like it's being repressed and held down, and then this unconscious desire just explodes. Motives for crime can be attributed to sort of Freudian motives as well. So some evaluations. Is this a plausible explanation for why people commit offences? Well, one of the strengths is that it does recognise, unlike most of the other theories we've looked at, the role of emotion in crime. So much of crime is actually emotional, isn't it? It's guilt and anxiety and hatred and anger and fear and desire. These are all emotions that the criminals are feeling as they're engaging in their crimes. Takes into account biological factors and the importance of early environmental factors such as how you were raised, the home environment. However, the findings are not causal. Children separated, for example, from their mother may develop affection and psychopathy as a result. Or it could be that children are born with affection and psychopathy, and that's why they have more separations from their caregiver. For example, they're put in juvenile detention at a young age, or they're hospitalised because they're getting in fights, or whatever the situation may be. One of the strengths of Bowlby's theory especially was it led to changes in the justice system. So some of the, especially in juvenile detention systems, we have a lot of visitation rights. We try to minimise separation between mothers and children with a view to their future development. So there are some practical applications. One of the limitations, though, is a lack of experimental data. And even with Bowlby's 44 Thieves, whilst it was nominally a fairly robust study in some ways. Bowlby was the classifier and the interviewer, so there was some potential, demand characteristics or bias involved, experimental bias, and many other limitations to those sorts of studies. Another issue is gender bias. So the majority of crime is committed by men, but if Freud's right, then females have this underdeveloped superego, so really they should be committing more crimes. And actually the statistics doesn't bear that out at all. Hoffman found little difference between moral development of boys and girls, but found that girls on occasion demonstrated more advanced moral development. So essentially saying that Freud's wrong about the differences between males and females. There could also be cultural bias, so interpreting Freud through a Western lens of things like repression and sexual repression, which he might explain many sexual crimes as being about, sexual desire and stuff like that. Actually, we know that rape, for example, is quite commonly about power, more so than the physical act of sex. Unconscious explanations and complex factors. So one of the problems with unconscious explanations, he committed the crime because of these unconscious desires that were driving his behaviour. Underdeveloped superego is they're very difficult to falsify. And that means that the explanations tend to be pseudoscientific. We talked about correlation and not causation. And Bowlby believed delinquency was the result of a complex set of factors. So to his credit, he recognised things like poverty, poor housing, bad luck, lack of stimulating environments, as well as these unconscious psychodynamic explanations. And this is supported by Farrington, who we looked at last time. Farrington's a key researcher, so he's worth, and versatile studies, so it's worth learning that one off by heart. Let's bring it all together then. So we talked about Donter's page in a previous video. We're going to use the psychodynamic approach to analyse Donter Page's motives for committing his murder. We said that Eysenck's personality theory could explain it, but actually let's apply psychodynamics. So Donter Page is a murderer and a rapist. But let's look at his past. He was cared for by his mother and great aunt, and I put cared in quotes because actually he was physically abused and mentally abused by his mother frequently. But he often alternated between care of his great aunt and his mother, so no stable attachment could be formed with his mum. Suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of his mother. This could lead to a dysfunctional development of his internal working model, beliefs about the world. Are other people generally good? No, he was raped by a neighbour when he was a child. He was beaten by his mum with an iron one time. Belief about the goodness of others? No, people are generally bad. Are people trustworthy? No, his neighbour proved that. So he's got this dysfunctional internal working model. Highly impulsive and aggressive, underdeveloped superego, or deviant superego. Maybe he was imitating the behaviour of his mother. Maybe his superego had been underdeveloped. Driven by desires for financial and sexual gratification, indicates a dominant id, underdeveloped superego again. So he stole money. What was he going to use the money for? He was going to prison in 2 hours, but he just did it. And sexual gratification. He didn't break into the house to commit rape. That was just something that happened. He made a decision, a drive, an impulse. And then did not demonstrate empathy or remorse. And this is classic affectionate psychopathy. So whilst we could argue that it lacks scientific validity and there are some limitations, it can be used to explain fairly vividly real life crimes. And that gives it some face validity at least. Remember, face validity does on the surface the theory explain what it seems to be explaining. Does it seem valid? Yeah, on the face of it. sum up them. So we've looked at development, the superego, underdevelopment, dysfunctional, as being an explanation for criminals, with them having underdeveloped, their restraint is on their id is not there. We talked about maternal deprivation hypothesis. Some of the things linked to that are, remember, low IQ, affectional psychopathy. These have clear channels into criminal behaviour. Extreme inhibition, we talked about explosive criminals and inhibiting their aggressive impulses. Some limited evidence with the 44 Thieves is less scientific, so it's difficult to study. Culture bias, gender bias, it's nomothetic and idiographic. Recognises the role of emotions, really strong because it recognises biological and environmental factors. However, much of the research could be explained probably better through personality, biology and environment, such as social learning theory, operant conditioning. So that is the psychodynamic approach. Quite a short one because you already know quite a lot about psychodynamic, as well as applications to other types of behaviour. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and I will see you later.